Hello everyone, welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you aren't, I'm EDJ, and we are starting a brand new series from the Great Kings and Generals. This time we're going to be looking at the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta, the original blood versus crypt, battle. And for the most part, yeah, I'm really obsessed with the Greeks at the moment, if you couldn't tell, and I really want to learn more about them, so yeah, we're going to be covering this series, and I'm going to be doing something a little different. Usually I just binge watch a series all at once. This time I'm actually going to do one recording a day, and then I've found a way to split this, mainly thanks to this helping down here. So yeah, I'm hoping that my reactions will you won't see me tire out by the end of a series, because usually, like I said, I record in mass, so I'm gonna cut that out now, and just focus one recording a day, and maybe there might breathe some more energy into me, hopefully. So yeah, I do know that this is obviously between Sparta and Athens, even the title gives it away, but I do know Sparta comes out on top. They have the hegemony over Greece before, eventually Thebes defeats them, and then Macedon, and then, the rest from there. Yeah, I do know the outcome. I do know of this conflict, but I never looked too deep into it. So I'm hoping to learn more, and I'm looking at the long version. From now on, for Kings and Generals series, I'm just going to be looking at the long full-length video, because I know a lot of people have been on me about that. And, I'm going to definitely get my act together and do that. So, yeah, I don't really have much else to say other than we should probably get to it, huh? Let's watch the Peloponnesian Wars Part 1. Well, Peloponnesian War,
The Peloponnesian Wars are perhaps the most famous instances of geopolitical conflict in the history of the Mediterranean. The titanic clash between Athens, an ascending power, and Sparta, an established hegemon, is well recorded by Thucydides and later authors, and has produced much discussion amongst classicist, philosopher, and political scientist circles. Such a large conflict is almost impossible to
Look at how small Rome is. I love these videos because you see how baby of a Rome is. Look at just Rome. It's just in the corner. Looks like such a baby. We both know it's about to take all of this, so, I don't know, I just always love seeing an early Rome. It's just jarring, you know what I mean?
To discuss in all of its granular details fully, for its prelude and aftermath are almost as sizable and complicated as the war itself. In our Peloponnesian War video, we will discuss various battles of the war and how politics in Hellas changed over time. In this long-form video, we will both coalesce all the episodes into one large narrative, and also add a few battles and descriptions, and make corrections to ensure our story is as accurate as possible. Welcome to our video on the entire Peloponnesian Wars, their battles and their politics. The ancient Greek world, after the battles of Plataea and Mycale in 479 BCE, where the Persian Empire was soundly defeated, was a very different place than the one before the invasions. The various city-states of the Hellenic mainland had adopted many tactics to survive the Persian onslaught, from fighting to fleeing to medizing, which meant submitting.
Discussions on whether to punish the medizing citizens as collaborators was often discussed before the war.
Sparta, a traditional hegemon, had stood defiant against Persia, a fact for which many city-states were thankful. Meanwhile, another up-and-coming city-state with a massive and imposing navy was gaining momentum. This city-state was Athens, which before the Persian invasion had been a marginal player in the Greek world with much political instability. Although Athens and Sparta had both played key roles in defeating Persia, they soon came to loggerheads over what to do after the King of Kings had been repulsed. Sparta, traditionally conservative in its foreign policy and content with its Peloponnesian sphere of influence, did not wish to fight further. Athens, emboldened by its new victories, wished to take the fight to the Hellespont and Asia Minor, claiming to be a liberator to the Hellenic city-states there.
Oh, I think I missed that.
Fight to the Hellespont.
Okay, Spartan King Leothecidas wished to move all Antonian Greeks to Greece. Athenian commander Xanthippus, I can't read, I'm sorry, was against this, as Ionia was full of supposed Athenian colonies. Can I just comment that I love learning about the Greeks? I'm really obsessed with them, and it's just like, they're so, obviously they're all under the banner of Greece, but they're all independent, like, you know, the Athenian, like, they're not one united thing, kind of like when you see other nations, you know, it's like, oh, this is just Persia, this is Rome, like, you know what I mean? It's like, alright, here's Greece, but they're fragmented, they're not really a unified, single government slash entity. They're fractured into various kingdoms. The only other, I mean, obviously there have been other nations like that, like you can think a lot of China's history is them breaking apart and then reforming, you know. But like the Greeks were kind of like this until, like, you know, they were conquered by Rome. You know what I mean? Like, you know, that's why I always said Rome is the thing that I feel like really unified Greece as this one single thing. But before, it was just various, you know, city-states and principalities fighting against each other. And also just the geography, the islands, the mainland. It's just like, I find it so fascinating. I'm like a huge Greekoid at the moment. I've been since last year. I'm actually going to Greece on May, so yeah, it's just because that's how obsessed I am with them, with its like culture and really wanting to see it, you know. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just like I'm like geeking out. I'm sorry guys, I've become a Greekoid.
Pont and Asia Minor, claiming to be a liberator to the Hellenic city-states there still under Persian rule. As a result, in 478 BCE, the so-called Delian League of Cities was formed, with Athens at its head. This league was meant to continue fighting and liberating Greek cities, and their military expenditure would be covered through a common fund on its titular island of Delos. The expansion of this alliance, its gradual morphing into an Athenian empire, and the anxiety it caused among the elites of Sparta were important drivers of the war. In response to growing Athenian influence, the Peloponnesian League was founded in 550 BCE under the Spartan purview, and was essentially a means for Peloponnesian states to stay under Spartan influence. These alliances, much like NATO and the Warsaw Pact during the Cold War, created a delicate balance of power, but many members within each would rebel and try to switch sides during the war itself. In the Prelude to War, described by Thucydides as Archaeologia and Pentakontetia, a noteworthy event was the construction of the Long Walls in Athens in 479 BCE, which drew nervous eyes from Sparta, who looked upon the constructions of a more fortified, militant Athens with trepidation. Themistocles, of Battle of Salamis fame, was sent as an ambassador to Sparta to sort out their differences. Themistocles managed to delay Spartan diplomatic overtures long enough for Athens to begin construction of the walls, and Piraeus, Athens' harbour, was finally linked to the city proper via the Long Walls. Compounding onto this, another moment when Athens humiliated Sparta was the Helot revolt in Messenia. The Helots, the slaves of the Spartan state, were fed up with their particularly cruel treatment under the Spartan regime and revolted. Athens offered to help Sparta quell this revolt, but was rebuked by the proud warrior city-state. Eventually Athens was allowed to help with sieges, because Sparta was only good with hoplite warfare. In the following decades, Athens' political and military prestige continued to grow, as they fought campaigns in the Hellespont, Ionia, and Asia Minor. Major campaigns even took place in 460 BCE in Egypt, though they were largely failures with many losses for the Delians. One particular battle in Cyprus in 451 BCE saw an Athenian victory, but the death of the Athenian commander Cimon. Soon, the vibrant Athenian democracy, with its constantly changing factions, had begun to assert itself as the uncontested top dog within its alliance. The treasury of the Delian League, previously located in the sanctuary in Delos, was moved to Athens in 454 or 453 BCE. These newfound funds, which were meant to support all the League's cities equally, were used for public works in Athens itself, much to the dismay of Athens's allies. In fact, in 451 or 450 BCE, Erythi, a city in Ionia, revolted against Athens, and many allies refused to pay tribute. Nevertheless, Athens's power was not dented. This was in part due to the fact that the funds seized from Delos also assisted with the development of the Athenian navy. Athens continued to export its naval power abroad until the Peace of Callias, which exchanged Cyprus for an Asia Minor free from Persian control. At the same time, Athens continued to expand its influence through the establishment of colonies such as Thurii in Magna Graecia, a traditionally independent part of the Hellenic world under Syracusan hegemony. During Athens' wars of expansion, it was also changing at home, as an innovative young politician called Pericles had initiated multiple democratic.
Yeah, something else I forgot to mention earlier, just seeing how much the Greeks fought amongst each other in their independence and division is also beyond fascinating to me. You know, I've joked around, like, yeah, the Greeks really love fighting each other. Also, just their influence, like we do know Tarentum was a Greek colony and whatnot, just how the Greeks kind of spread, you know, their influence all around the Mediterranean and so on, even into, like, Italy. It's just, I don't know, they are a really interesting, you know, like, culture, and just how all over the place they were. I don't know, I find that interesting.
Reforms, initiating measures against the wealthy. Looking towards the sea, a policy continued by his successors, he invested in the development of a strong navy for the promotion of Athenian trade interests. Many Peloponnesian states fought against Athens, one of which was Aegina in 460 BCE. But the rising naval superpower defeated Aegina, besieging and conquering the city.
Vagina? I don't know. I'm so sorry. This is so immature. I heard vagina. I'm so sorry. I heard vagina. I was like, wait. No, it's Aegina. Okay. I'm so sorry. I don't know why my head heard that. Yeah, get my mind out of the gutter, right?
Soviet historiography has actually called this the First Peloponnesian War due to its role in forging the alliances that followed in the full-scale conflict. It began in 460 BCE with the obscure Battle of Oeno, where the Athenians and the Argives banded together in common interests and defeated the Spartans, and then with the Battle of Aegina, where the Athenians defeated 70 ships of Aegina and subjugated it as a tributary. This war happened in conjunction with Delian campaigns in Egypt, which severely strained their resources, but we will focus on the Hellenic mainland. The Battle of Aegina is itself an obscure battle, but set the stage in the on and off conflict. The Spartans rallied their allies, while Athens began its goal of extending influence in central Greece. This is due to Athens' strength at sea being balanced out by insecurity in the Attican Peninsula. As the war began, Megara, which was having territorial disputes with Corinth, requested Athenian assistance and temporarily joined its alliance. This is why, in 457 BCE, two major battles occurred almost concurrently, the battles of Tanagra and Oenophita. The first battle unfolded because of the conflict between the Phocians and the Doric city-states. Sparta sent 1,500 hoplites with 10,000 allied troops, and then marched into the region to tame Phocia. Athens responded by sending its own force, because according to Thucydides, they were also afraid of Sparta leading internal forces to overthrow democracy in Athens. Tanagra was chosen as the battleground as the Spartans were worried about going through treacherous territory or through the sea, which the Athenians controlled. The Athenians had 1,500 Argive allies and their own contingent coming up to 11,000. We don't know much about the battle, but the Spartans ended up winning, restored control of the Dorian cities from Phocis, and retreated back to the Peloponnese. Athens regrouped, and then, after 2 months, continued on to Enophita. There they fought the Boeotians and defeated them, eventually tearing down the walls of Tanagra and then completing their own long walls.
I will say, I mean, obviously I know how this all ends, but I will say, it is interesting when you see at first, obviously the Spartans are renowned warriors. Hoplite battles is what they excel at, you know, I guess pitched land battles. But the Athenians seem to have a lot going on for them too. I mean, they have a great navy, obviously. Naval superiority is a great asset. They also seem to be more innovative with their technology and in siegecraft. I mean, the Spartans, he mentioned earlier, like, Spartans didn't really excel at sieges, so that's another huge advantage there. So, yeah, I will say those two aspects definitely go in favor of the Athenians, and I wonder if they're going to play a huge part in the upcoming wars. And also, I don't really know about, I mean, obviously I think they're all using hoplites, you know, phalanx warfare. That's like the bread and butter of how the Greeks fought. But I will say, I wonder how the Athenians, like, if they were the exact same as the Spartans, or just how their infantry worked. Because obviously they're going to have battles, and Kings and Generals is usually really good at explaining that, but I'm just interested in, like, you know, if their equipment or anything was unique, or it was just, you know, straight up. You know what I mean? I'm sorry, I don't think I'm really saying it correctly. Either way, let's get to this.
However, the war in Egypt began to strain resources for Athens, and they ended up starting to lose ground in Greece as well. Because of that, a temporary truce was brokered by Cimon in 451 BCE. Athens negotiated a peace with Persia in 449 BCE, called the Peace of Callias. This treaty solidified Athenian control over coastal Asia Minor, while relinquishing Cyprus to Persia, allowing Athens to return its efforts to the mainland. In the meantime, Sparta was continuing its conflict with Phocia, this time over who got to control the pilgrimage center of Delphi. Sparta initiated the Second Sacred War, marched into Delphi, and kicked out the Phocians. In their place, they appointed Spartan-friendly custodians of the temple. Pericles was at the time considering a restrained foreign policy, but could not allow such a sacred oracle to be under Spartan control. He thus marched back to Delphi and pushed the Spartans out, reinstalling the Delphic custodians. The final battle that we know of from the war is the Battle of Coronea. Thucydides mentions that some Boeotian anti-Athenian exiles tried to return and reassert their rule by seizing territory. Athens tried to assure its Boeotian gains were solidified, and sent 1,000 hoplites under a certain Tolmides. Initial success was had in the capture of Chaeronea, but when the Athenians marched into Coronea, they were ambushed by the Boeotians, who slaughtered many Athenians, including Tolmides. And so the war ended with a return to the pre-war status quo. Fearing Athens would soon become their overlord rather than their ally, many other cities in the Delian League revolted, like Samos in 440 BCE. The war began over a Samian-Milesian dispute, which had begun a few years earlier. Miletus petitioned Athens for help, and after failed mediation, Pericles went forth with 40 ships, overthrew the oligarchy in Samos, and put a fine on the city. As soon as Athens left, some Samians revolted and tried to free themselves of the Athenian yoke. This revolt threatened to spread to Mytilene, another Ionian city that was a hub for the region, as well as to Byzantium, Caria, and Chalkidiki. The nearby Persian satrap Pissuthnes was also eager to assist the revolt if it spread, and Mytilene would be keen to revolt if the Spartans provided help.
I do know, I've heard that, yeah, you know, Persia was around, and that even the Spartans later, I believe, joined them, or they end up being like a team against Athens. I think that's what I've heard. And it's interesting, obviously, we haven't really covered the Persian Empire on this channel other than its death at the hands of Alexander the Great. So it's interesting to see them, you know, when they're still healthy and kicking. And obviously they had ambitions to conquer Greece. It didn't work. But you see them as a player now. They're just sitting there, and obviously they're like, hey, the Greeks are fighting each other, so let me see if I can be like a third outside party and help them continue to lose influence and fight each other. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think Persia is going to be a very interesting aspect of this series, because it seems like they're already there, just like, what can we do to sow some more chaos? And like I said, I mentioned earlier, like, how are the Athenians gonna fight? And obviously, you see the flags between red and blue, but it's like, I'm remembering that, yeah, these other islands are their own independent thing. Sure, they're a part of the league under the main head being Athens, but they're also their own independent, you know, people as the rest of Greece are, the Greek city-states are, and so it's like, now it's like you have to play you essentially have to be diplomatic, right? Just because they're in your league doesn't mean they don't want to feel like you're their overlord or that you're their, you know, thing. They still value their independence. All the Greeks, city-states, islands seem to do. So yeah, it's just an interesting aspect, you know what I mean?
Athens sent 70 triremes into the region, crushing the revolt. In the end, neither Persia nor the Peloponnesian League sent help, dooming the revolt into destruction. After this, Athens was the undisputed hegemonic master of the Delian League. Initially, Pericles was a conservative and restrained foreign policy actor, trying to avoid conflict with Sparta. Archidamus II, one of the two Spartan kings, was also keen to avoid conflict, continuing in the long Spartan tradition of restraint and introversion. In fact,
I do know the Spartans being introverts, you know, kind of being a bit different, but it's amazing how much my perspective of Sparta has changed. When we watched Historia Civilis's Spartan Constitution video, just how, like, yeah, I originally had an idea that, you know, the Spartans were like hot-headed, overly aggressive, you know, kind of like jock slash bully types. I mean, they are like that in a sense, like at several points in history, especially through an outsider's perspective, but they were awfully, you know, uniformed. They had an interesting form of government, and could show restraint and like a lot of civility, you know. A bit of an oddball in Greece, but still, like, you know, obviously through the outside perspective, they are, what I said earlier, like overly aggressive bullies and whatnot, jocks, but like, there is an interesting side to them. They're more than that, I think is what I'm trying to get across. I'm not verbally putting all my thoughts as appropriately as I want them, unfortunately, but yeah.
445 BCE, the two cities had signed the 30 Years' Peace, dividing ancient Greece into spheres of influence between them. This was important as the years between 460 to 445 BCE are considered to be a sort of Cold War between the two leagues, with Argos allying itself with Athens and Megara with Sparta. Eventually, this Cold War would heat up, when the expansion of trade interests caused much friction and led to conflict between Athens and the most powerful secondary actor in the Peloponnesian League, Corinth. Corinth was a major naval power with many colonies, which led to many political crises with other cities. One such city was Epidamnus, which saw conflict between oligarchic and democratic factions. In 435 BCE, a democratic coup took place, expelling the oligarchs to the surrounding Illyrian tribes. The resulting conflict drew the attention of Corcyra, Epidamnus's mother colony, but they initially did not intervene. Instead, the Epidamnian Democrats sought assistance from Corcyra's own mother colony, Corinth. The Corcyraeans, who were not popular in Corinth herself, called upon the Athenians for assistance, who proceeded to engage in a proxy war in Sparta's sphere of influence.
Okay, so ironically, Athens backed Corcyra, who backed the oligarchs, while Corinth backed the Democrats directly. This is part of a long tradition of ideological inconsistency by superpowers in geopolitics. Yeah.
Influence. Corcyra and Corinth eventually fought each other in the Battle of Sybota, which flared up the situation considerably. The Battle of Sybota was part of the broader skirmish conflict between Corinth and Corcyra between 435 to 431 BCE. In 433 BCE, Corinth parked their ships on the south of Corfu, and after a standoff with the Corcyrians, sailed home and began to amass an even larger fleet. This alarmed the Corcyrians, who were not part of any alliance, so they sent envoys to Athens for assistance. Corinth also sent envoys to gain Athens as an ally, and after much deliberation, the Athenians decided to help Corcyra, and sent 10 ships to Corcyra under direct orders to not attack Corinthian ships unless an invasion was to take place, making this a purely defensive alliance. Corinth and its allies had 150 ships, while Corcyra and their allies had 120 ships. The Corcyrian fleet was on the southern tip of Corfu, anchored in the small islet chain called the Sybota Islands and Cape Leukemi, from which the battle takes its name. To their south, in Camerium, Corinth put their ships. At nightfall, Corinth put their fleet to sea and moved north. They met the Corcyrians in 3 squadrons, with Athens on the right flank. Corinth's Megarian and Ambracian allies were on the right, Corinth's ships were on the left, and the rest
Train for a hands-on career at
allies were in the center. The two fleets faced each other and then clashed. The large presence of javelin throwers and hoplites meant that the ships were essentially boarding vessels, with much hand-to-hand fighting as people invaded each other's ships. Initially, Athens was restrained and attacked only if the Corcyrians were under threat. This changed slowly as the Corinthian left was faced with the Corcyrian right, with the latter losing out in the clash. Athens rolled in, but in the end both they and the Corcyrians were pushed onto land. The Corinthians went to collect their dead, but the Corcyrians and Athenians were afraid that they were going to land on Corfu. As such, they pushed back into the sea and attacked. Right on time, Athenian reinforcements arrived in the form of 20 ships, and the Corinthians retreated. The next day, Corinth saw the enemy ships come out for battle, and sent an envoy asking if Athens and Corinth were at war. Athens replied that they were only here defensively, forcing Corinth to retreat. This bizarre stalemate meant that both sides raised victory trophies, a topic of division allegedly only solved the year after in the Savlaki exhibition in Olympus.
Yeah, that is so interesting. Obviously, they're fighting on their side, but also just there defensively. Yeah, I wonder why Athens chose not to support Corinth. I don't know, I don't think he explained that, but I do find that whole situation a little funny, especially with both of them having to both claiming victory. I don't know.
As both Corcyra and Corinth claimed victory after their stalemate at Sybota, Athens further inflamed tensions by imposing economic sanctions on the city of Megara in 432 BCE. The so-called Megarian decree was sponsored by Pericles himself and was meant to be a form of revenge for the alleged trespassing on Demeter's.
Okay, so Demeter, the goddess of agriculture, was important due to her connection to the Eleusinian mysteries in Athens. These mysteries are considered among the most that's an F, right? I'm so sorry. More secret religious rites of ancient Greece, symbolizing the rebirth of the Demeter's daughter, Persephone, the rebirth of spring.
Sacred meadows by the Megarians. The reality was less religious and more political. The Megarians had backed Corinth, which made them hostile to Athens. Sparta furiously demanded that Athens forsake the decree, and also insisted they let go of Aegina. However, the Athenians continued to be intransigent, and continued to bully smaller cities in its alliance.
Yeah, again, it's interesting just how much almost aggressive Athens is being, because, you usually don't associate that, right, with Athens. Usually, like I said, the stereotype I had in my head, Sparta was you'd expect the more aggression to be from Sparta, because, they were the warriors, we're the warriors, and you were really aggressive, and, we enslave a lot of people. Most of our population is slaves, but, and you think Athens, the democratic intellectuals who would rather, study and read than fight. But nah, obviously those stereotypes I've had have obviously shifted as, there's more to them than that. Obviously those are aspects, but you know what I mean, right? Like, it's evolved the more I've learned about Greece. Excuse me. And, so, yeah, I will say that Athens is really pushing it right now.
One such city was Potidaea, a Corinthian colony which...
Okay, Macedonia, a Peloponnesian ally, was also instigating revolt in Thrace. Athens also raised tribute from local states to pay for fighting off the Macedonians,
which had many ties to its mother colony, including annual magistrate visits. Athens issued an ultimatum to Potidaea to cease all communications with Corinth and pull down its walls. Potidaea sent ambassadors to both Athens and Sparta, but negotiations broke down as Athens had already sent troops to enforce the ultimatum. The Potidaeans instantly revolted and made an alliance with the cities of the Chalcidici and the Bottiaeans, who joined in the rebellion. They were aided by the Macedonian king Perdiccas, who helped their forces move inland to Olynthus. Athens' 30 ships and 1,000 hoplites, under the command of General Archestratus, initially fought Perdiccas, as Archestratus anticipated that the Potidaeans would immediately comply with the wishes of Athens and increase their tribute. Meanwhile, Sparta and the Peloponnesian League had made some unofficial guarantees to Potidaea, and Corinth sent 1,600 hoplites and 400 light troops to Potidaea as well, under the command of Aristeas. These were informal volunteers, so as to not violate the 30 Years' Peace. In response, Athens increased its commitment with another 2,000 hoplites and 40 more ships, under the command of Callias. After some fighting against Perdiccas, the combined Athenian forces sailed to Potidaea and landed there alongside 400 cavalry, while the Potidaean and Peloponnesian alliance numbered 1,600 hoplites, 200 light troops, and 400 cavalry. Archestratus seized the Macedonian city of Thermae and immediately began a siege of Pydna, with the Athenian reinforcements joining as soon as they arrived. Callias quickly arranged a ceasefire with Perdiccas, as Pericles had instructed him to focus on quashing possible upstart revolts, rather than focus on the Macedonian front. The Athenians were quite happy with this arrangement and concentrated all their forces against Potidaea. 3,000 Athenian hoplites, their allies, and 600 Macedonian cavalry left Pydna and marched to Potidaea, while their 70 ships sailed along the coast. Aristeas had been chosen to command the infantry, and Perdiccas, who had already broken his agreement and abandoned the alliance with Athens, was selected to command the cavalry. The anti-Athenian allies split their army in two. The Corinthians and Potidaeans positioned themselves on the isthmus just to the north, while the Chalcidians, Macedonians, and other allies took up arms near Olynthus. Their plan was to trap the Athenians by luring them into the valley towards the isthmus, and then coming up from Olynthus to encircle them.
Oh, a good little trap there. That's an interesting trap. I wonder if it's gonna work, but I said that's a little cunning. If it works out, definitely catch them off by. I also just love the Macedonians immediately jump ship from the Athenians. I feel like we're gonna get a lot of that, huh? With everyone just jumping ship onto other sides. Also cool to just see a young Macedonia, as it's not, it'll eventually become the main hegemony of Greece until, the rise of the Rome. So it's cool to just see a young Macedonia before they've reached their zenith under Philip and Alexander. So yeah, I don't know about the Athenian generals or what they're made of. We're gonna find out. But, if they can catch wind of this plot, then they would have to move individually, right? Like, take one at a time to not have to fight on two fronts. I don't know, if it works out, this is a pretty cunning plan, and then immediately encircle and jump them from behind, but I don't know, I guess we'll see if the Athenians can get out of this or not.
The Athenians managed to outmaneuver them, and sent the Athenian supporting Macedonian cavalry to Olynthus, blocking the reinforcements. The Athenians then attacked the main allied army, the Corinthian wing under Aristeas.
Okay, Athens, I see you. I'm amazed by how aggressive Athens has been, but man, you're kind of seeing how formidable they can be.
Succeeded in routing the Athenians, but the Athenians had more success in routing all other parts of the enemy force. Aristeas was almost killed as he built up a column and entered the city of Potidaea. The Peloponnesian League had lost 300 men, while the Athenians were down only 150, Callias amongst them. The Athenians erected a trophy to commemorate the victory, and then built a wall to the north of the city alongside the isthmus. After this, the south was encircled with Athenian reinforcements.
Wow, again, great use of siegecraft. Immediately building a wall behind you so you don't get jumped. Very Julius Caesar-like. Yeah, the Athenians, man, I'm just amazed by their prowess, you know, and being able to see it. Like, I've never really... You always hear about the Spartans, right? Always, when you think about it, like, when you think of martial prowess. But it's cool to finally see the Athenians and what they're made of, you know?
Of 1,600 hoplites under the command of Phormio, son of Asopius. This army landed at Pellene to the south of Potidaea and built fortifications to the south to completely blockade the city. Recognizing his situation was dire, Aristeas told the citizens to evacuate by sea and left a garrison of 500 men to defend the city. The civilians ignored this call, so Aristeas escaped from the city and tried to call on Chalcidian and Peloponnesian assistance to little avail. The siege continued until the summer of 430 BCE, when further Athenian reinforcements were sent against Potidaea. This force was commanded by Hagnon of Nicias and Cleopompos of Clinias, and consisted of 4,000 hoplites, 300 cavalry, 100 triremes, and 50 ships from Lesbos and Chios. By 430 BC, a plague had begun to ravage Athens, and Hagnon's army spread it amongst the Athenian troops at Potidaea, where it killed 1,050 of his 4,000 men. Due to this, and also due to his siege engines not being able to breach the walls of Potidaea, Hagnon gave up and returned to Athens. However, despite Athens' inability to breach its walls, by the winter of 430 to 429, Potidaea had been almost starved to death, with even some cannibalism being reported. Athens, by this time, was already at war with Sparta, and the battle had both they and Potidaea lose 2,000 hoplites and depleted parts of their treasury. Hence they agreed to lenient terms of surrender. The Potidaeans, their wives and children and auxiliary troops would be allowed to walk away freely and go anywhere they wished. Each woman could take 2 garments with them, each man a single garment, as well as money for the journey. The Athenians kept control over Potidaea and resettled it with their own colonists. As Potidaea was being besieged, Sparta organized a meeting of the Apella, the Spartan citizen assembly, in which various foreign dignitaries could speak. Megara, still under an Athenian blockade.
Yeah, so Potidaea is an interesting thing that they, again, classic siege maneuver, you know, starving them, even though they couldn't breach the walls at the end. That's why I said, I would rather just, like, fight in a pitched battle than be stuck in a siege. Like, sieges are awful. They're, like, the worst of war. If you're stuck there, just starving, and... You know, I would rather just go out and fight and possibly die than to be trapped. Yeah, overall, it's like, at this point, there's no there's no peace, right? It just has to go full on. Everyone's fighting now.
Spoke first and demanded Sparta begin wartime preparations. The Corinthians also spoke, maintaining how they had warned the Spartans, who did not trust Corinth, about the evil imperialism of the Athenians, bringing up Aegina as an example. Sparta, they claimed, was complicit in Athenian imperialism by being passive. Then came the Athenian delegation, which immediately declared that they did not consider the Spartans their judges, but their equals. They then proceeded to claim that they had a right to their hegemony as the champions of Hellas against the Persians, and in that essence, they had won their position by their own deeds. In addition, they said should the Spartans go to war and defeat them, they would only take their place as hegemons of all of Hellas.
Those are some big words. He dropped straight to the Spartans. You know, hey, we were here by our own merit, challenge us, and we will replace you. Yeah, those are fighting words. Like, Sparta can't back down from that, right? Like, that's like almost a battle of pride there. You just have to give battle now, right? Or war.
These speeches are approximations of Thucydides' interpretations of what could have been said, and thus are fabricated. They do, however, provide clues as to the geopolitical aims of the various actors, as well as the general ideologies of the combatants. The Athenians also claimed that they had been, in fact, quite moderate in their aims, essentially warning the Spartans that they could muster even more troops than they had sent to Potidaea. After Athens had had its say, Archidamos, king of Sparta, rose to the proverbial podium. He addressed the dignitaries by mentioning that the Spartans could raid the valleys of Attica. However, he himself was not of the party that desired war, and warned the Spartans that if they started war now, that war could very well pass down to their children. After all these speeches, the appella voted by shouting, a common means of voting in ancient Greece. The result was a profound yes to war. Sparta still tried to send 3 embassies to Athens in order to avoid further escalation. However, it was too late.
Again, I'm amazed by the Spartan restraint and them even trying to avoid this conflict. I thought they would have just been, yes, let's fight from the get-go. But yeah, I guess, as Caesar would say, the die is cast, right? Like, it's war now.
Ultimately, it will never be certain whether the outbreak of war between Athens and Sparta was indeed inevitable. However, the actions of the major players of the era certainly contributed to the eventual outbreak of hostilities, such as Pericles' adventurous foreign policies for Athenian expansionism and Corinth's pursuit of Athenian containment. Sparta was restrained, but also had a war party that considered the Athenians a threat to them. While Thucydides claimed that the fear of Athenian supremacy moved Sparta to war, modern historians debate how true this was, and no true conclusion will ever be fully reached. What we do know is that after a long period of proxy wars and hegemonic consolidation, the Delian and Peloponnesian leagues were now on a collision course. The Peloponnesian Wars would last decades and see stories of untold bravery and unimaginable brutality. They would see large geopolitical ploys across the Mediterranean and ideological conflicts within the city-states which fought in the war. And they would see the return of suffering amongst the people of Hellas, suffering not seen since the Persian Wars. Thus, the Peloponnesian Wars began.
And that is where we will end this video. This was a great part 1, guys, and I guess, yeah, just stay tuned tomorrow when part 2 drops. Until then, bye everyone.